As part of We the People, celebrating 250 years, here's This Day in History.
Well, as we count down to America's 250th birthday this summer, we're sharing our We the People series, and that includes two people who explored a whole lot of this country, Charlie.
On this day, May 14th, back in 1804, the Lewis and Clark expedition left St. Louis, Missouri, on a mission to explore the Northwest from the Mississippi River to the Pacific Ocean. The expedition came 1 year after the United States doubled its territory with the Louisiana Purchase. Thomas Jefferson commissioned the expedition to explore and detail as much of the new territory as possible. The group of about 30 men traveled up the Missouri River before eventually crossing the Continental Divide and making their way on the Columbia River to the Pacific Ocean. After 2.5 years, the expedition returned to St. Louis, bringing back a wealth of information about the region, documenting natural resources and plants, and producing the first accurate maps of the area. That's This Day in History for May 14th.
Yeah, quite the expedition. Lots of terrain to cover and a lot to learn. A lot of Native American tribes that they met along the way. Sacagawea, a big part of that as well. So yeah, important piece of history.
Yeah, they saw parts of the United States that had never been seen. Part of the reason for them to go was they made the Louisiana Purchase. They didn't know how much land they actually got because nobody knew. The land was sold by the drainage of rivers, and they didn't know how far north that reached.
Yeah.
And that expedition helped define the borders.
All right, Charlie, thank you.